This RealAg Radio podcast is brought to you by Barricade 2 herbicide from FMC. Tough on weeds and gentle on your crop, Barricade 2 herbicide destroys broadleaf weeds in cereal crops. Along with powerful weed control, you can save up to 15% with the 2025 FMC Cashback Program. Visit ag.fmc.com/ca for more.
It's time for RealAg Radio on Rural Radio Channel 147 on Sirius XM. RealAg Radio and RealAgriculture.com is your home for insight and analysis of the issues that are impacting your farm business. Let's get real and get connected with RealAg Radio. And welcome to RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio 147, a Sirius XM. Shaun Haney, your host here on this Wednesday edition of the show, better known as Hump Day. It's the middle of the week already. It is racing by, and there are many issues and stories for us to talk about and chase and really get after it. Indeed. If you have any feedback on today's show, you can send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. You can also find Real Agriculture across all the different social media platforms. Too many to mention at this point, but if there is one that exists, we're probably on it. And you can also call the Real Ag feedback line, 855-776-6147. Well, hey, today on the show, we're going to talk to Brian Comeault. His company is ICL, and we're going to talk to him in the market segment, find out what's going on in wheat, find out what his thoughts are on canola. We had the Stats Can report last week, and get his reaction to what he saw. Is there anything that's out of whack from his perspective? And how much is he hearing from farmers in terms of maybe potentially changing some of the crop rotation up based on what we're seeing right now in from the tariff perspective? So we'll get his thoughts on that. We've got a product spotlight with KWS. We're talking about hybrid rye here today. Kevin Serfas, a great customer of KWS, will be with us in that product spotlight. We've got Dean Roberts, who's chair of Sask Oilseeds, to talk about what's going on in just a reaction and just a concern from a China tariff perspective. Not only do we have some concerns about Canadian canola being used in the U.S. biofuel industry for renewable diesel and for SAF, now there's a lot of concern about what will China's buying be like. And Dean's going to be here to give us the producer perspective on that. And then, hey, we're going to have some fun talking about wheat breeding. And we're going to look at it from a U.S. perspective. Two wheat breeders from LCS Seed out of the U.S. are going to be with us. And we've got Marla Barnett, Dr. Marla Barnett. And we've also been joined by Dr. Dylan Larkin as well. So Dr. Barnett is from the Central Plains region, and Dr. Larkin is from the PNWs. We're going to talk about kind of the state of plant breeding in the U.S. and what are some of the tools that are being used to drive better varieties onto the market, and what does the future hold? What are some of those things to think into the future on as well? So looking forward to that. Got some feedback for us to check out and talk about from the RealAg mailbag. I'll put it that way. Message here from Stuart, who is a hog producer in Ontario, who says, and I posted on X about the fact that, the American government's going to be rolling out this $9.7 billion aid package to producers. And in Canada, there's talk about compensation, but so far it's been in talk, in the form of loans and increased potential financing. Stuart says, hey, for what it's worth, this Canadian farmer worked his tail off to prep for tariff uncertainty and figured out how to mitigate risks on my own dime. We run our business, not government. I don't want a penny of subsidy. All I want is governments and people to respect the contracts they sign. So that is from Stuart. On some of those tariffs, over the weekend, I got a bunch of messages as well. Lauren says, hey, Canada was following the U.S. lead. That was then. This is now. Trump's goal is to repatriate manufacturing to the U.S. and possibly the USMCA. If Canada tried to undercut this, especially with the U.S. automotive sector, by axing its EV tariffs, all hell would break loose. Thanks a lot for that message, Lauren. That, again, is speaking to the fact that Canada is really caught in a very much a bind here in the trade war between the U.S. and China. Todd says, hey, the first mandate should be eliminating marketing boards and the various cartels they support. And who else we got messages from? Brett says, blaming Trump for for the Chinese tariff put on Canada. That is total Trump derangement syndrome on full display. Dave says, the annoying part of this tariff talk is how quick the governments will give non-refundable support to the auto, steel, aluminum, and dairy industries, while out here in the West, we might get more loans available if a guy qualifies. He continues, the effects of China on the canola market didn't start in the last week. There was a crash on Labor Day, long weekend, 2024, connected to the Chinese influence. Can't say they put a lot of effort in investigating it then. So a lot of people trying to provide their perspectives on what is happening here at this time as it applies to all these tariffs and trying to figure it all out and trying to steer through it and trying to better understand it. Not easy times, but that's what we're here to do at Real Ag Radio. So let's get to it. Let's take a break. And when we come back, we got Brian Comeault be with us right after this.
Hi, I'm Lindsay Smith. Joining me now is Kathy Jordison. She's the board of directors for Genesis Fertilizers. How will Genesis Fertilizers help mitigate risks related to pricing, supply chain disruption, and input costs for farmers?
What happens with an investment in Genesis is that the price going up and down won't matter so much to the farmer who's getting their fertilizer from the plant, who's actually a shareholder in the plant, because if it goes up, their profitability goes up because they get paid at the end of the year what the profit of the plant is. The other ones just benefit because there's more product available in Western Canada, so it helps mitigate the price risk. So this changes the makeup of inputs in Western Canada in that the farmers get more power. For them, they then are basically controlling one of the big plants. So it kind of allows the farmers in Western Canada to get more control over their own destiny.
That is genesisfertilizers.com. You've got all the information there on how to be involved and updates.
If you grow soy or edible beans in Ontario, you know that Sclerotinia white mold is no joke. Yield loss can be devastating, and timing fungicides can be complicated. But did you know there's a new seed treatment that can help mitigate yield loss? Start the year off with your best foot forward against disease. Ask your seed supplier or local Agrimart group to pre-treat your beans with Heads Up. Part of a complete white mold management plan, ask your seed dealer about Heads Up today or visit headsupst.com.
And welcome back to Real Ag Radio here on Rural Radio 147 Sirius XM. Hey, for every acre, every row, every seed, precision wins every single time. Only Seedmaster delivers unmatched accuracy for better yields and bigger profits. Seedmaster, driven by precision, leading the way in seeding innovation. Let's talk markets here on Real Ag Radio. Joining us right now is one of the founding partners of a new firm, ICL. It is Brian Comeault. Hey, Brian, it's great to chat with you.
Yeah, you bet, Sean.
Okay, the markets. I guess it just get like maybe one word, one phrase. How would you describe the state of today's ag commodity markets?
I would say unknowns, or there's a lot of balls in the air as far as what we're working with as far as information that we know. So, this is traditionally the time of year where we have a lot of question marks, right? Question marks around acres, question marks around yield, all those normal question marks. But now you get to throw in, some foreign policy question marks, trade barriers, whether or not Canada's being targeted specifically on some of them. It's just kind of throwing a wrench into a lot of marketing plans. And then add to that, there's even some macro worries, recession fears, and just general economic malaise that I think is taking some risk premium out of the market, which always happens when there's a lot of things that are unknown as well.
What was your impression of last week's Stats Can report? Did anything stick out to you where you're like, I don't know about that?
Not really, actually. The wheat acre increase was a little bit larger than what I would have thought. But when you rationalize it, it does make some sense. Wheat is a more stable commodity because of the way the basis levels have been acting it still produces a pretty decent cash price for farmers at a relatively low risk. I think that a lot of farmers in Western Canada are thinking that wheat prices don't have a lot or have less downside than some of the other commodities. So it's a bit of a safer bet. And so it's kind of understandable that those acres would rise a little bit. The canola acres, they're not too surprising as far as they're not outside the realm of normal. Just pulling up my spreadsheet here. 17 acres, 21.6, I think is what StatsCan reported.
Yeah.
So that kind of brings us to a 21.5 million acre harvested. That kind of puts us, with average yields at about 18.5 million tons of production. That does, that's kind of on the average end, I guess. We've seen some 19s in the last couple of years, but 18.5 is kind of normal. It might seem tight, actually, given some of the demand that has picked up over the last couple of years. But if we are going to see trade issues, we might see some issues with demand as well. So it might balance itself out.
Do you think it's too early for growers as we're mid-March here, get into the back half of the month? We're not too far from putting seed in the ground for a good part of the prairies.
Yeah.
Is it too early to be like, I'm switching out of peas or I'm switching out of canola because of some of these trade issues? Or what are you thinking?
The sense I get, at least from the clients that we've talked to, which, isn't, to be fair, isn't a huge sample size across Canada, but is that the plans aren't changing a lot. And, I do think that there's probably more likelihood of a decrease in the acres than there is an increase based on what's happened. I don't think it's going to be a widespread change. Seed and rotations are decided, well ahead of seeding, even in some cases, well ahead of the previous year's harvest. So I don't feel that there's going to be a material difference in the acres, but if I had to be on one side of the fence, I think that there's more likelihood of a small decrease than there is of an increase.
Mm-hmm. We did on the announcement of these tariffs from China, on meal and oil, we did gap down.
Yeah.
On November canola. I guess how do we view at the time of us doing this recording, canola is like $5.91 and change. How do we view this current price relative to the issue of tariffs, the threat of China putting potentially tariffs on the seed as well, depending on how that investigation goes? How do we view this? Or is it be patient, or what are your thoughts?
We are advocating for some patience. We are seeing, if we look at the nearby contract, or the one that has the majority of the open interest, we are seeing it move towards testing some longer term support. The previous year's harvest, for example, or the harvest low from this last year is about $30 or $35 away from the close today. So that seems to be where the risk is right now. I think a lot of farmers are looking at it and saying there's a lot more upside potential. I know there's a lot of analysts kind of saying, let's step back, like no position is a position, and let's wait and see what plays out. So I think there's a lot of that going on. I don't get the sense there's a lot of farm selling happening or panic selling happening. I do get the sense that because of the rally that occurred before the tariffs in canola, that there was a significant amount of folks who added to their coverage levels over time. So I don't think that stress is there either. There isn't that stress to market and to push canola onto the system. So I think it may find some support there. It may be $20 or $30 lower than we're at today, but it might still be there. That's not to say it'll rally back to those old highs. We might be in a bit of a more suppressed kind of range going forward. And those risks, will exist. I mean, there's risks on the horizon for us as well. We may be going into a federal election here in Canada at some point. How negotiations happen with the new government, whether that's Mark Carney or whether that's Pierre Poilievre or whoever ends up, winning that election. But I think once that happens, we'll be getting into some more serious, trade negotiations whoever that is. I do think a current administration like Mark Carney coming in, I would imagine he would be, somewhat motivated to get some of these trade issues taken care of, because then he can chalk it up as a win on his, on his election campaign. So there are some green shoots, but there's also some risks. And you mentioned, that they haven't put tariffs on canola seed yet. My view is that they might be looking to do that as a bargaining chip, or kind of dangle some incentive over us, and to kind of bring us to our knees a little bit. But I think overall, I mean, maybe I'm just an optimist, but we've kind of seen these trade wars and trade issues, happen previously with the same administration in the U.S. So it's kind of, you got to make that U.S. administration feel that they've won something, or else they continue to press. So I think the negotiation will be important.
We are kind of wedged. Like
we are,
we're wedged because of the EV tariffs, that we did not make that decision in isolation, and removing those EV tariffs because we want to ship. We think it's going to help us with China on aquaculture, pork, peas, and canola oil and meal may actually upset the U.S. side of this triangle, which then really hurts canola potentially on the biofuel standpoint, just as an example. So it is very much a wedge indeed. We want to talk about wheat as well. What is going on in wheat?
Well, right now we're kind of getting into that seasonal part of the year where, it's coming out of dormancy. The crop in the U.S. is at risk. We've seen some dryness in the U.S. Midwest coming into this period of time. And then over the last couple of days, there were some really bad storms that occurred that may have caused some damage. Yesterday, there was some crop progress reports released, and the Kansas crop progress report cut 4 percentage points off of the good to excellent rating. So they went from 52% to 48%. That kind of helped the wheat market out a little bit. It's just, this is the time of year when that wheat crop is at the highest risk of damage. And particularly if, there isn't rainfall to kind of help it along. We always, kill a wheat crop in April, May, and June. That's when, we always look for our initial kind of places to enter the market for our own wheat marketing program. And I think that we're starting to see the early parts of that occurring as well.
You mentioned the opening, Canadian farmers intending to plant more wheat. Is the market signaling, hey, plant more wheat, or is that because of other crops more so?
I think it's partially, I'm not an agronomist, but I think it's partially some rotation. They've been taking wheat out of the rotation. I think it's time to put some back in. I do think it is a safer commodity as far as the volatility goes. It's a cheaper crop to grow. And margins are getting squeezed at the farm gate. It's just a safer crop at this point in time. I think there is some upside potential based on the futures. The basis is pretty advantageous right now. The clobbering of our Canadian dollar kind of helps out with that as well. And we've been rapidly taking our interest rates down and kind of moving that differential between Canada and the US to lower our currency's value. That kind of helps out on the cash side for Canadian farmers as well.
Are you a little surprised how the Canadian dollar has hung in there at the values that it is, just shy of 70 cents?
Yeah, actually, we cut interest rates just in the last week, I think, and we've kind of rallied into that. It might have been a little bit of a sell the rumor by the fact kind of play, but overall, it's still a pretty weak loonie, and I think that the market is also. I think the market has priced in a lot of the weakness in the Canadian economy, but I think there's still kind of this wait and see mode on the US, right? There's still a lot of positive data coming out of the US. A lot of folks are still, calling for a soft landing of the US economy. I'm not sure I agree with them fully on that, but I think that there's just more negativity priced into the Canadian dollar right now than there is the US dollar. So if that happens, if we see that balance start to shift, we may see the Canadian dollar rally just because of the, more of the value of the US dollar than the Canadian dollar.
Yeah. Hey, Brian, if somebody wants more information on ICL, how do they get hold of you?
We are about a few days away from launching our website, which is CanadianAgMarkets.com or IrelandComeault.com. Both of those will take you to our website, and we'll be launching a subscription service for our reports within days as well.
Yeah, great stuff. Well, hey, it's great to have you here on RealAg Radio, and look forward to our next market chat. Thanks a lot.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Shaun.
That is Brian Comeault. He is one of the partners at ICL, new firm. Brian's been he's been in this game for a while. He is no rookie to the Canadian market scene. Indeed. Hey, don't put your yield at risk. Put your trust in a proven solution like Anvil Nitrogen Stabilizer, Super U Premium Fertilizer, and Tribune Nitrogen Stabilizer from Koch Agronomic Services. These products offer high active ingredient concentrations imitator brands can't match. See the difference at defendyourn.ca. We'll be right back with more of RealAg Radio right after this.
Growing corn? With Envita, you can cut your nitrogen and maintain yield, or maintain nitrogen and increase yield. Envita takes nitrogen from the air and turns it into nitrogen for your corn. It provides a right place, right time source of nitrogen to maximize your yield. Farmers who use Envita see healthier plants, bigger cobs, and less tipback. Envita is guaranteed to add more bushels to every treated acre. Start growing with Envita. Visit azotic.com to learn more. That's AZOTIC.com.
Get all the information you need to keep your pulse crop healthy and profitable with the Pulse School on RealAgriculture.com. The Pulse School is a free YouTube video series covering agronomy, research, and more across a host of different pulse crops. It's also available as an audio podcast wherever you download or stream your favorite podcast. Check us out on YouTube or visit RealAgriculture.com. The Pulse School, brought to you by BSF Canada.
I'm Lindsay Smith from RealAgriculture.com. Join me Monday nights for The Agronomists, a 1-hour live and interactive show broadcast across YouTube, Facebook, and X. Monday nights at 8 p.m. Eastern, I host expert agronomists from all over the country to give you answers to some of the toughest agronomic questions. Join us live or catch the replay Tuesday morning. That's The Agronomists with me, Lindsay Smith, Monday nights live at 8 p.m. Eastern.
And welcome back to RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM. It is time for a product spotlight, this time with KWS Seeds. And we're joined right now by a great customer of KWS Seeds. It is Kevin Serfas of Serfas Farms out of southern Alberta. Kevin, how are we doing?
I'm good, Shaun. How are you?
I'm doing great. Okay, so hey, how long have you been growing hybrid rye?
I think we're probably going to be into our fourth harvest coming up here in 2025.
Okay. Yeah. And what are you mainly using it for?
Feed. It all goes back into cattle production. So we're taking it off as silage. We've started actually taking a lot of it to seed for combining as well. It's a product that it's a little bit niche in the cattle feeding industry in terms of the grain. You have to be set up a little bit differently in order to feed it, as rye is not super palatable to cattle, but we've got the ability to roll and feed multiple products. So we actually are really liking feeding it the grain. So but it's all going to cattle feed.
Great stuff. Now, one of the advantages that I've heard from different cattle feeders is the fact it spreads out the silage season. Has that been one of your experiences?
Yeah, 100%. We're able to get in there kind of the last week of June and start harvesting the fall rye, the hybrid rye, or the first week of July, and then it's basically a 2-week jump start on spring seeded cereals. So it definitely allows us to spread that out, and even on the combining side of things. I think we've done it the past 2 years where we've taken it off it as a combined cereal, and you're in there a couple weeks for sure before any sort of dryland cereals that we've got. So it works well. It helps spread the work out.
Now, because of that 2-week window prior to the spring cereals, like barley, which is very common in Western Canada from a silage perspective, do you ever put another crop in after that because it is so
we have. That's one of the nice things is, there's been a lot of times where we'll have the trucks and the forage harvesters on the field, and right behind it at the same time we'll have drills in the field planting an oat crop, which will take it off in kind of the second week of September. We'll go in there and cut it with conditioners and bale it for green feeds. So we're almost producing the same dollars per acre off of those acres. I mean, albeit it's on two different crops, as say a corn crop would be. I mean, and I've seen guys put those oats in or barley or whatever, and they'll silage that second crop too. We've even gone in. We accidentally had to go in and take a crop off super early this year, earlier than we wanted to, but we took it off. I think it was the first week of June, and we went in and seeded a soft wheat crop behind it, and we took that off and we combined it, and it was like full maturity soft wheat combined. It works good. There's different ways to do it. Some guys will go in ultra early, get a crop off because they don't want to be bothered with silaging in July and August, and then they'll put a barley in for combining, or the way we've done it before is put an oat in there for green feed. We start a lot of calves, and we find that oat crop green feed works really well. So
definitely provides a lot of flexibility. What is there any other benefits you can think of?
Yeah, I mean, we've been kind of fooling around with potatoes here for the past. This past year we grew our own crop of potatoes, but we've been renting some land where we've had another renter come in and kind of grow potatoes. So it's a bit of a shared rental agreement. And in southern Alberta, with the wind and stuff that we've got, like, it's fantastic environment for growing potatoes, but it's also a terrible environment in terms of soil erosion, and potato land is always really, really susceptible to that. So we started putting in a fall rye crop after guys are taking potatoes out, and it's basically eliminated any of the soil erosion problems that we've had. So it's a really good tool in terms of getting a cover on the ground in the wintertime to prevent that moving of soil. I mean, you're from here, you've seen that, right? I mean, there's lots of times you get on social media and neighbors are ripping on neighbors because their land is blowing all over the place and different things. It's a great tool for helping combat that.
Well, everybody, if you are interested in hybrid rye for this coming fall, you want to talk more about it, talk to your local KWS retailer, or of course you can go to kws.com/ca to find out more. Hey, Kevin, thanks a lot for joining us here today.
Yeah, you bet, Shaun.
Hey, we'll be right back on RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio 147 Sirius XM right after this quick break.
Find everything you need for outstanding weed control in your wheat and barley from the cross-spectrum herbicide experts at Corteva. Corteva is proud to offer a wide selection of cross-spectrum herbicides for maximum convenience, effective resistance management, and customized control of your toughest grassy and broadleaf weeds. No matter what kind of weed challenges you're experiencing, we've got the right fit for your farm. Visit corteva.ca to learn more.
It's summertime, and you've got a lot of important decisions to make when it comes to your corn crop. Let the Corn School on RealAgriculture.com help guide you through those big decisions with input from leading experts in the field. If it's spray timing, disease identification, or any other field issue, the Corn School's got you covered. The Corn School on RealAgriculture.com, brought to you by BASF and Pride Seeds.
With volatile markets and rising costs, now's your chance to be a part of the solution. It's time to secure your future with Genesis Fertilizers. gain control, and ensure access to locally produced nitrogen. Act now to protect your farm's future for generations. Visit genesisfertilizers.com to learn more. There's a lot of issues impacting Saskatchewan agriculture. There might not be one that is bigger than the news that dropped last Friday night. China deciding to put some pretty stiff tariffs on Canadian canola, canola meal, oil, pork, as well as field peas. Joining us to discuss some of the impacts to the canola industry is the chair of Sask Oilseeds, farmer from West Central Saskatchewan, is Dean Roberts. Dean, great to chat with you.
Good day. Thank you for having me, Shaun.
Okay, Dean, so we're recording this interview, just so everybody's aware, we're recording this interview on Thursday night. And today you met with Minister Harrison, as well as, I believe, Premier Mo. What's your message to them in regards to the impact here of what China's done?
Well, I think our message was already in their ears when we met with them, that the canola industry is hitting some very choppy waters. We are in severe trouble right now. We're facing trade wars and tariffs and disputes going with two of our large trade partners, both the U.S. and China. We're not in a good place, but hearing Premier Mo's address today, they get it. They understand the problem.
What needs to happen?
Well, in the very short term, we need the federal government to engage with the government of China, start working on resolving the issue, start talking about the issue. We have a very short period here to get in front of this before we potentially go into a federal election, a writ period where things go shut down. We need action now. The longer tariffs go on, the more permanent they tend to become. We can't afford to wait 3 months to resolve this. We need action now.
So that's a priority. What about the idea of compensation? Does there need to be compensation to growers at this point?
Well, I think there's going to have to be if this drags on for very long. Farmers are going to take severe losses alongside with the industry people who put money into crush plant expansion in the province.
One of the things that I have heard from some people is, well, wait a minute here. These tariffs are only on meal and oil. We can still ship seed. But there's a big but to this, and that is the fact that Canada is still awaiting potential tariffs on the canola seed as well from China.
Yes, you're spot on. This addresses the oil and meal going to China, but this doesn't address the earlier MOFCOM investigation into the anti-dumping investigation into Canadian seed into China. So we still have uncertainty around that. We have uncertainty into the U.S. market. And even this meal issue isn't totally resolved at the moment. So all this uncertainty, it creates unpredictability, and grain markets hate it. Unpredictability and instability.
Premier Mo mentioned that some of the crush plants in Saskatchewan may be shut down temporarily or for longer, which would be a loss of jobs and a loss economic activity in the province. Are you concerned that there's going to be that those plants could shut down?
Well, most certainly. Those plants crush seed into oil and meal, and the underlying question to that would be, what is the value of the meal? Where is it going? Who's buying it? Our main two destinations for Canadian meal are the United States and China, with 1/3 of our meal, 2 million or so metric ton a year, going to China. So when you have 100% tariff on 1/3 of your potential exports, that is a big concern. And when you start looking around the world to find homes for that meal, it's not as simple as you would think.
We saw StatsCan this week forecast canola acreage. I think it was about 21.7 or 21.9 million acres for this upcoming season. Are those acres under threat? Could farmers plant less canola this year?
Well, I think that question will be on a lot of farmers' minds. Are you going to put $12 into the spreadsheet, 14, 15? What is the number you can expect to get for a new crop canola bid? And the cost of going canola goes up every year. It's expensive. Fertilizer is expensive. You're going to want predictability in the market you're going to be delivering into. So I think that question will be on growers' minds coming into seeding.
Last week, the federal government announced some programming through AP Advanced Payments Program, essentially more loans or a more friendly loan environment. We won't go into the details of it. Meanwhile, we're seeing the U.S. farmer getting compensation, a $9.7 billion package, because the market dropped on the 24 crop. They're talking about a market facilitation payment upcoming at some point in 25 because of some of the losses that are being suffered on farm. Is this the kind of ad hoc programming that Sask Oilseeds is asking for?
Well, I don't think farmers need more debt right now, Shaun. The problem is this isn't a liquidity problem. This isn't like a railway stoppage where we have to manage our way through a couple of months until we can get grain delivered and shipped. This is value destruction of the crop. This is money coming off the revenue line. That's not fixed with financing. That has to be replaced with dollars.
I know you've met with we've talked about the Saskatchewan government. We're going to find out who the new ag minister is on Friday. What would be your message to that individual, whoever ends up being the Minister of Agriculture?
Well, I would say it's time to get on the phone and get talking with China and start looking for resolutions. We need to sort this out quite rapidly.
And it's the speed at which this needs to happen. This is not something that can take 2 to 3 years. This is something we need to be dealt with now. That's what I'm hearing from you, Dean. I just want to make sure I've got that straight.
Absolutely. Yeah, the urgency and immediacy cannot be overstated. We have to move quickly to start finding solutions.
We've been talking to Dean Roberts. He is the chair of Sask Oilseeds based out of West Central Saskatchewan. Dean, really appreciate you joining us here today.
Thank you, Shaun.
You know, you heard our discussion yesterday with new Ag Minister Cody Blois. I think the reality here, connecting the conversation there with Dean, with the conversation with Minister Blois, is Canada's definitely headed down a path of compensation to farmers for some of the trade losses here. I think one of the things we can expect, right or wrong, is a potential government here to be patient. And I think the biggest overriding arching fact here is the election. That needs to get out of the way, and then we're probably going to hear more of a topic here. It'll definitely be a topic for the Conservatives, and I think it's going to definitely be a topic that is pressed on the Liberals as well. Under the Trudeau government, they really slow played these kinds of support programs, more likely to look at the APP program as ways to facilitate money through Farm Credit Canada. And again, those are very different kinds of programs like we see south of the border. Now, there's lots of ways to do this. But of course, we are going to compare and contrast all the time very closely to what's happening in the U.S. And we're talking per acre payments. Now, limits on some of those payments. So you hear about this $9.7 billion package that's going to be put out to the U.S. here in the coming month or 2 months. You can get, say, $40 as a wheat grower per acre, but there's like $125,000 cap per person and $250,000 per family entity. So it's not just an open-ended here's a check. There is a cap on it, which is not as helpful to some of the larger farms and producers that are out there. But if you look at some of the market conditions right now, as it applies to canola, as it applies to peas, there is a lot of concern out there, not to mention what's going on in aquaculture, which I'm sure is not a good situation as well. But hey, I'd love your feedback on what you heard there from Dean Roberts from Sask Oil, also very involved with the Canola Council of Canada. So send me your feedback, Haney at RealAgriculture.com. We'll be right back with more here on RealAg Radio, Rural Radio 147. But first, I want to tell you about MMP, maximizing productivity and profitability with an innovative all-in-one approach to farming, combining accounting, business planning, agronomic field planning, and advanced technology. MMP Ag Intellect delivers personalized solutions that empower you to make confident, data-driven decisions. You can visit mmp.ca to find out more. Right back right after this.
If you're applying a low-rate N stabilizer, you might be falling for a losing strategy. Low-rate products promise great results, but may lack the potency of higher active ingredient concentrations, so great isn't always what you get. Don't put yield at risk. Put your trust in proven solutions. Anvol Nitrogen Stabilizer, Super U Premium Fertilizer, and Tribune Nitrogen Stabilizer from Koch Agronomic Services. These products offer higher active ingredient concentrations imitator brands can't match. See the difference at defendyourn.ca.
The Canola School on RealAgriculture.com is your one-stop shop for everything a canola grower needs. check out our free video series on YouTube for all the latest in canola agronomy, research, marketing, and more. Don't have time to watch? Download the podcast version of the Canola School on RealAgriculture.com or anywhere you download your podcasts. Stay on top of all things canola with the Canola School on RealAgriculture.com, brought to you by BASF and Invigor Hybrid Canola.
And welcome back to RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM. We're now going to dive into what's happening in the world of plant breeding from a U.S. perspective. And we're joined by two members of the LCS wheat breeding team. First up, we've got Dr. Marla Barnett, who is out of the Central Plains with LCS Seed. Marla, it is great to have you on the show.
Yeah, hi. Nice to be here.
And we're also joined by Dr. Dylan Larkin, who is out of the PNW, specifically Walla Walla, Washington. And so maybe we can get a couple wine reviews from Dr. Larkin as well. Dylan, it's great to chat with you.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
I guess we'll have to leave wheat, we'll have to leave wine for another discussion. Today we're going to focus on wheat. I guess, Dylan, to start off with you, from your perspective, what are some of the biggest challenges right now that wheat growers are facing in the U.S. that you're trying to solve for them through genetics?
Well, so I would say that, right now, some of the issues that growers are facing are a lot of uncertainties when it comes to, the environment and such. So, dealing with situations like drought stress or freeze damage. So trying to basically develop varieties that can handle those changes so that farmers can expect more consistency out of their wheat variety. I would say that that's one of the things there.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. And Marla, how have the breeding priorities evolved in kind of the last decade to address some of these challenges that Dylan's talking about? Have they changed?
Well, by and large, kind of at a broad view, maybe not entirely that much change over the past 10 years, but locally, yes. I think Dylan and I both, work in very different parts of the United States, very different regions. And so he has a set of priorities that are slightly different, perhaps, than the priorities that I have down here in the Central Plains. And a good example of that might be grazing ability or grazing tolerance. So in the Southern Central Plains, winter wheat, especially, is planted and grazed throughout the winter by cattle. And that is a very different management style or management practice in the Southern Central Plains, where it really goes directly to profitability. And so the ability to get basically two crops off of 1 acre. You get your gain from your cattle, but then you also take those cattle off and get a harvested wheat crop off of that. So you get two crops off of one field. So that directly goes to the profitability of the farmer. And so, those breeding priorities can change very regionally, but by and large over time, the last 10 years, I don't think we've seen that much change in priority.
Now, tools though, that has evolved, right? Dylan, talk about some of the tools that you're using now.
Yeah. So, there's a lot of really exciting, tools that, breeders have access to now, versus even 10 years ago, it seems like. So we regularly use molecular markers and to help us make our selections. So basically you have something that's linked to a specific part of the DNA that can basically help you to identify, okay, this plant has this sort of resistance to, say, like stripe rust. So it helps breeders to make selections without even needing to see it in the field almost. We're also using technologies like genomic selection too, which can predict the performance of a variety without growing it as well, only at a much larger scale across the entire genome of a plant too. So there's a lot of really great tools out there that we're using, and a lot of things that are in the pipeline as well. So you've probably heard of gene editing and things of that such. But right now there's not really much of that happening in wheat. But in the future, I think that could be a possibility that we see.
Yeah, and when I hear you describe some of those tools, I think what comes to mind for a lot of the audience listening here is, okay, that's going to produce better varieties. And yeah, that is obviously the goal. But
sure,
Marla, as well, I think what we also should be hearing there is the speed at which you're able to deliver on that. Like,
Yeah.
and if varieties are able to come to market faster because of breeding techniques, that's also lowering the cost of delivery to the market as well. So there's a benefit there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
absolutely.
I've always kind of approached my job as a breeder that I can go into a field of, fixed lines and not necessarily try to find or select the best possible line that's in that trial, but I should be able as a breeder to find the worst and get rid of it. And really that is my job as a breeder, is to get rid of the worst and do that subsequently every time, every year. And with the tools that Dylan's mentioned, that only works to help us get rid of the worst each year, and even, earlier than typically than what we have in the past.
Yeah. Dylan, you mentioned not a lot of gene editing happening in wheat yet. I just want to circle back to that. How come?
Well, I think, one of the main issues right now is like in the Pacific Northwest, for instance, 80% of the wheat that we grow in the PNW is exported to Japan, South Korea, Thailand, Philippines. So a huge export market there. And there right now in Japan and South Korea, for instance, there is a big reluctance for them to accept gene editing or gene edited or genetically modified wheat. And so, we as, in the PNW, we have to be very conscious of what they want in the seed, in the grain that they're buying. So if we release a genetically modified wheat variety, they will not want that in their food production system. So we have to be very conscious of that, because they might reject a shipment of seed because if it is contaminated with something like that.
Yeah, and even if we've decided that gene editing actually isn't genetically modified, there could be a perception in some of those end use markets, and that's kind of what that's what the caution is around.
Exactly.
Hopefully it changes into the future, because in this case the U.S. farmer benefits if we're able to use all the tools in the breeder's toolbox for sure. But Marla, when you were talking about the priorities earlier, for a lot of growers, they're thinking, well, yield. And that's like, yield really does, it gets you in the door, so to speak. But there's a whole package, a puzzle that has to be put together to make, the best varieties have, there's disease and there's characteristics, and then wheat also has this quality thing that can be a factor depending on what wheat type. So it's a bit of a puzzle and a tough one for you you almost need like Google Maps to steer through that mess.
Well, I mean, you can look at it that way, but in the end, if you, if you keep your customer interests, basically what the farmer needs, if you keep that close to your chest, close to your heart, at the top of your mind, you're going to be okay. And really that's all I do as a wheat breeder, is I just try to develop commercial products that are going to have a fit and meet a demand and are going to help the farmer. So
do you kind of have two customers, Marla? Do you have like the farmer customer's got to grow grow the variety, but then you're also thinking past that, where you're thinking about the miller, for example? Sure. It's so.
Sure, absolutely. In the Central Plains, we're a little bit different as far as exports that Dylan mentioned. We're about 50-50. So about 50% of the grain harvested in the Great Plains is used domestically, and about another 50% of it goes to the export market. Our export markets are a little different than the PNW region. The major importers of U.S. wheat are places like Mexico, some African countries, Thailand, Philippines. Some of those countries are big importers of U.S. wheat, but by and large, the quality parameters that we work with in the Central Plains is, we're hard red winter wheat, And that market class, for that price point, for the protein level, it should be able to make a loaf of bread. And so we definitely, have a wheat quality lab here at LCS. It's in Windsor, Colorado, and we work very closely with our colleagues that work in that quality lab. And we do a lot of analysis on lines pre-commercial to make sure that we maintain the quality of U.S. wheat and that all of the commercial products that we put out can make a loaf of bread.
Yeah. It's kind of what makes wheat different than corn, for example, right? Corn.
Yeah.
It's much more, sort of a straight path to what corn is used for, obviously from an ethanol or livestock feed perspective. But, wheat's has a lot more markets and a lot different types and a lot more uses than a crop like corn, in comparison. So what should farmers be paying attention to when thinking about wheat varieties in the future from your perspective as a breeder? What do they need to make sure they're keeping in mind? And Dylan, we'll start with you.
Well, I would say that for one thing, they should really consider, what is their production environment? In the Pacific Northwest, it's a very diverse growing environment. There are many different growing environments within this small region. So I would say that a farmer, that first of all, they want something that's going to be high yielding, of course, in their area. But they also should really consider, is this variety going to be well adapted to my area? So say if you're, an irrigated or a farmer that grows primarily on irrigation, you probably don't want something that's going to be too tall or too late, for instance, like in the Columbia Basin. Whereas if you're a farmer up in the Northeast Washington or Palouse region, where you're seeing a lot more dry land production, you're seeing rainfall less than 16 inches a year, you probably want something that's going to be more drought tolerant and more cold tolerant as well. And you might want something that's going to be later maturing too. So, just be conscious of, what your production system is, and that not every wheat variety is going to do the best at your location too. So I would suggest, really paying attention to what the state variety trials are showing, in terms of data. That's very helpful, listening to your agronomists and extension experts too, to find the best fit for your area.
Yeah, well put. There's definitely, just a difference between Washington State, Montana to Colorado, for example, never mind covering the rest of the country. Marla, how about for you? What are some things that come to mind for you?
Yeah, the first thing that comes to mind is kind of just overall profitability. And with that, comes, a lot of different things, management, and of course yield. So that's kind of what I would first look at, is just kind of the overall general profitability on how I want to manage my wheat crop. By and large, at least in the Central Plains, wheat is a low input crop compared to, other crops or other alternatives. And so the ability to yield and have a stable yield across many different years and many different environments, I really prioritize that. I also, when looking at varieties, try to recommend that farmers plant of different range and maturities. I'm often quoted as saying, in winter wheat in the Central Plains, I can't tell you when it's going to rain, but I can tell you it's going to matter. And a lot of times yield trials in winter wheat aren't so much a pure yield trial, but they're just a precipitation lottery. And what I mean by that is, if you can have your variety mature and catch a rain when it was the most needed for that variety's, lifespan, there's a good chance you're going to win the yield trial, just if you catch the rain at the right time. So related to that, it's always a good recommendation to have different range in maturities on your farm.
For many of us that live in drier areas, we very much identify with that weather lottery. Indeed.
Yeah.
Hey, let's wrap up thinking about the future and sort of use our imaginations here. What are some of the things that, as plant breeders in the crop of wheat, that you're excited about? What potentially could happen into the future? Marla, start with you.
Yeah. So I'm excited, looking towards to the future. I think hopefully maybe in the next 5 to 10 years, I do think that some of our competitors within the wheat breeding community at large, I think some of our competitors are going to develop and release hybrids, and if they have a need or fix a problem and are higher yielding and can deliver that seed in an economic way, absolutely, let's do it. Also, I think genetic modification is also on the horizon as well. And again, for the Central Plains, if we can have a benefit and grow wheat with less water, again, the same amount of yields with less inputs, and if it solves the problem, I'm all for it if it meets a need for the farmer. So I'm excited about the future in those two respects.
Yeah, those are good ones. Dylan, how about you?
Well, I would say that, much like what Marla was saying, there's a lot of cool new technologies and opportunities out there to help the farmer. But for me, what really excites me the most is being able to combine these new technologies like biotech, or using drone imaging in the field to help make selections, or using genomic selection, using all these things to get a better product out to the farmer quicker. I think that's what really excites me, so that we can better adapt to the changes in our environment and the crop production system, so that, say if a new disease comes along, the breeder can react quicker and release a product that can meet those challenges to help the farmer sooner rather than later, so that it can minimize the impact of that disease, things like that. So I think, just combining all these cool technologies to really just create a better product that can help the farmer in the end.
Yeah, love it. This has been really awesome. Really, very much appreciate the conversation, talking about where wheat breeding is today and where it could potentially go in the future. Thinking about it from the customer's perspective. This has been a fabulous discussion. Really appreciate you joining us here today, Dr. Marla Barnett. All the best to you.
Yeah, thanks.
As well, hey, Dylan, it was great to meet you. It's Dr. Dylan Larkin out of the PNW with LCSC. Dylan, thanks a lot for joining us here today.
Thank you so much.
Now, at the beginning of the show here today, we were providing some of the feedback, some of the things that you have sent us, providing different perspective on all sides of the issues. I want to hear from you. You can send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com, or of course, you can always find Real Agriculture across all different social media platforms, or call the Real Ag Feedback line. That number is 855-776-6147. I challenge you to provide your perspectives, 855-776-6147. Thanks, everybody, for getting real and getting connected with Real Ag Radio. We'll chat again tomorrow. Cheers, everybody.
Thank you for downloading this Real Ag Radio podcast, brought to you by Barricade 2 Herbicide from FMC. 2 modes of action, a wide application window, and outstanding recropping flexibility make Barricade 2 Herbicide the right choice for cereal growers. Plus, you can save up to 15% with the 2025 FMC Cashback program. Visit ag.fmc.com/CA today.